with new insights and new thoughts. And today we're going to address the significance of Wednesday, May 14th, 2014. This is on the Jewish calendar known as Pesach Sheni, the second Passover. We're going to find out that when we deal with a Jewish holiday, not only is it a remembrance of something that's happened past in our history, but it has an impact in our lives today. We pause, we draw energy, we draw strength, we draw insight to be able to enliven ourselves and bring more passion into our lives today. And there's something very important about Pesach Sheni, the second Passover, that applies to ourselves, but also the lives of those who are recovering alcoholics, those who are recovering from other kinds of substance abuse. And I'd like to, in a sense, all of us together understand where they are coming from and the respect we must give to those who are trying their best to live on and to be able to catch up in many aspects of their lives. And of course in our lives as well, because Pesach Sheni has an important lesson to all of us at any point of our lives. So our subjects today will be addressing this, as you can see on our bulletin board right now. Passover, take 2. What is the significance of this Pesach Sheni, the second Passover, as it applies to us, the second chances in life, as well as to the recovering alcoholic from their perspectives and what we can learn from that in our own lives as well. So let us first talk about the broader issue. What is Pesach Sheni? Let's go back to basics. This is the background. A year after the Exodus, God instructed the people of Israel to bring the Passover offering on the afternoon of the 14th of Nisan. This would be exactly a year after they left Egypt. And following the same instructions as they did the first time, to eat that evening roasted the sacrifice over fire together with matzah and bitter herbs, the maror, as they had done in the previous year before they left Egypt. So now comes the first anniversary, and now we're told we have to relive the experience, what we did last year coming out of Egypt. But at that time, there were certain persons who had become ritually impure. They were the ones who had come in contact with a dead body. In particular, this was the bones of Joseph, and therefore could not prepare the Passover offering on that day because they were impure. So they approached Moses and Aaron and they said the following: Lama negara, why should we be left out? Why should we be deprived and not to be able to present God's offering at this time, like all the other people are doing this? And this is what happened. In response to their plea, Moses turned to Hashem, and God responded and said, yes, for those who are impure, they can bring it a month from now, on the 14th day of Iyar. And this became known as the second Passover. So Wednesday, May 14th, in this year 2014, is actually the 14th day of Iyar, known as the second Passover. Pesach Sheni in Hebrew. For anyone who was unable to bring the offering at its appointed time in the previous month because they were impure, and the Torah adds as someone who couldn't make it in biblical times, they couldn't make it to Jerusalem on the first Passover, they have a second chance now a month later. And this is what Pesach Sheni is all about. So the day represents a second chance. And in our lingo, so to speak, the second chance in Jewish thinking is generally spoken of in terms of teshuvah, the power that we all have to return, to make up. And in the words of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak of Lubavitch, this meaning of the second Passover means there's never a lost case. We may not have been available a month ago, we were too far away, we may be spiritually too far away, we're given a second chance. And here comes, dear friends, a deep meaning of this, as we will explain. Now, how do we actually mark this day? Typically, we mark it by not saying Tachnun, special supplication prayers, and also it's the custom on this day to eat matzah, and if possible, the hand-baked shmura matzah. Now let's get into the deeper. I'm going to present to you what it means to make up the second chance. Does the second chance in life just simply mean, well, I'll just go back and do it right? Or perhaps it means something more deeper. And I'm going to give you some examples of people who missed opportunities and how we could deal with them in terms of making up. So here, let me go into it in some detail. Again, please have in mind that we're saying the second Passover reminds us it's never too late. There's always a second chance. This is the message of Pesach Sheni. And therefore, biblically, it's ordained as the second Passover for those who could not bring the Passover offering at the designated time. Now, all of us can relate to such an expression. There's always a second chance. We always want a second chance. Whatever level, whatever we're doing in life, if we messed up the first time, it soothes us, so to speak. It soothes our neshamas, our souls, in knowing that we can make up. Now, but there's something more to it than simply a second chance. Because on the simplest meaning, it may mean, some sort of an inspirational, something that we write on our desk calendar. But how does that mesh in our real day-to-day life? So I want to suggest a small neighborhood survey that could apply to our understanding. Let's imagine we're talking to Sarah, a neighbor, and she says to us, I missed the 6:22 train coming from Penn Station, and I had to spend an extra 35 minutes at Penn Station reading a 2-year-old newspaper. And she says, this time that she spent, the 35 minutes wasting, in the Penn Station, this is time that I could have used to tell my daughter a bedtime story if I'd gotten home in time. So I'll make that train today, I hope. But yesterday 6:22 ain't ever coming ever again. That's scenario number 1. Keep that in mind. Let's go to a second scenario. Well, Jeffrey is a successful divorce lawyer, and he says the following. 20 years ago, I knew a wonderful lady that I wanted to marry. At one point, the words were at the tip of my tongue. And I just, I knew that she would say yes. But at that moment passed. I never popped the question, says this lawyer. I have no regrets because I'm happily married today. But that moment when I could have popped the question to this lady will never come back again. Not in this lifetime anyway. So we have two scenarios. A mother who says, I've lost those minutes from that train. I'm never going to get those minutes back. And this divorce lawyer who's happily married, but he says, I'll never be able to, that moment that he could have popped that question to the young lady will never come back again. I now want to apply that in a more deeper sense of how are we to view this. What would be out of the box kind of thinking in terms of the second chance that these situations would apply to our life? How are we supposed to go? How would a person make up or learn from these situations? What would be the approach? Now, typically when we speak to ourselves, what do we mean when we talk about a second chance? Is it the ability to step back into a capsule, a time capsule, to be transformed to the previous point of time, jostle aside our misguided self and do it right the second time? Is that what it means, a second chance? If that's all there's to it, in these two cases, to have gotten on the train and been home, or popped the question, what would we have gained? What would we be gaining in this case, the second chances? We could just have well done it right the first time. The Torah's idea of a return, of a second chance, is not just to undo or correct the past error. Teshuvah, returning, is about transforming the past. It means reaching back to change the significance of the consequences of what happened so that the end result is better than what would have been if it had not occurred. We've gained something from the experience. Let's now apply it to our scenarios. Sarah, the mother. If I'm honest about this, the truth is that even if I had made the train, I would have sat and read through the bedtime story so quickly that, as I could, just because I'd promised my daughter what I would. My mind would have been on other things that day. But the fact that I missed the train and broke my promise made me realize how much my daughter needs me. Not just my physical presence, but also my attention and mindfulness. Tonight, I'm going to sit with her on her bed and really talk, something that we haven't done for longer than I care to remember. So in this case, she's learned from the experience, not just simply to have been able to read the story, read it quickly, but now that she missed it and she's going to do the second chance, she's going to make up and really appreciate it and note and make that meeting with her daughter more meaningful and more significant. Now let's apply this to Jeffrey. Right? Jeffrey wanted to marry someone, never popped the question. Let's see how it would look if a person revisits it. You know, there's nothing I value more than my marriage. I believe the woman I married is my destined soulmate, the one who's truly the only person in the world for me. The more I think about it, the more I see that the missed opportunity in my past as a perpetual challenge to experience and to surpass, so to speak, that degree of yearning and hope in our own relationship. And it was to apply that to his current world. I say to myself, if I was able to see such promise and depth of feeling in that false lead, or the other lady, how much more so in my present real thing? It makes me fall in love with my wife all over again every day of my life. So what we're saying here is that in a deeper sense, that not simply go back and fix, but come back and transform. Take that experience that we have, the second Passover teaching, and apply it to our life as well. That not just simply relive, but take the experience and come back even better than before to transform the past as something even deeper and more meaningful. And now we come to our second idea of second chances in life from the perspective of a recovering alcoholic. And this is a very, very important idea of appreciating. As you can see again, our subject matter today is the second, what is Pesach Sheni? What does it mean, Passover, the take two, and the second chances, and what it means to have a second chance in life. And now we're going to deal with the recovering alcoholic perspective. And I respectfully ask you to appreciate that. Imagine if you and me were such an individual, and if you understand them from where they're coming from, not only will we have a better appreciation of people who are facing these hurdles and these challenges, but also appreciate what they're going through. And in my work, I've met many, and I have people who I can proudly say are friends. They are recovering alcoholics. And unless you know exactly where they're coming from and the second chance they see life is giving them in terms of being a recovering one, the more we'll appreciate what they're going through, and to be cognitive and to be appreciative that A, that we don't have such a challenge, and B, to go out of your way to make those who do have that appreciate knowing that you understand what they're going through. So let's take this from this perspective, the second Passover from the perspective of a recovering alcoholic. Again, reminding everybody that Wednesday, May 14th, is actually a semi-Jewish holiday called the second Passover, Pesach Sheni. Again, on this date, it commemorates when the Jewish people left Egypt. It's a mitzvah to celebrate the holiday of Passover. That's what Pesach is all about. When the temple stood and may be speedily rebuilt in our day, this celebration would entail bringing a special sacrifice on the day before Passover. It's called the Paschal Lamb. The Torah tells us there's a second Passover, our subject for today. This was granted to a group of men who were unable to fulfill their obligation as the rest of the nation on the regularly appointed holiday on the 14th day of Nisan. Why was that? Because they were ritually impure. They were excluded from performing this sacrificial offering in honor of Passover because they were carrying the bones of Joseph, and therefore they were ritually impure. And someone ritually impure could not bring this sacrifice. So they were aggrieved, they were upset because they were missing this opportunity to fulfill this commandment. They approached Moses and asked him, could possibly an exception made for them? God spoke to Moses and told him, we're going to establish a make-up date 1 month later, after they would have a chance to purify themselves And therefore, we have the second Passover. It's a mitzvah. It became a mitzvah, a commandment from the Torah. It's become internalized for all time. And that's our discussion today. And our question now, as we move on, if the second Passover was destined to become a commandment, why didn't God simply relate this commandment to Moses at the outset, as he did with many other mitzvahs? There are many other mitzvahs presented to us, plan 1 with plan B. Why was it in this case, why didn't God just tell Moses what the backup plan was? That if you couldn't make it the first one, you have a second chance. Why go through this whole scenario of those presenting their case? Why should they be left out and getting a response? The backup plan only came after their query and their interception, so to speak. Why did the people have to first ask for it to get it? So the second Passover represents the power of teshuvah, to return. By returning to God, one has the power to retroactively transform past failings into some very special merits. Because it's the penitent's prior distancing, so to speak, the experiences of being separated from God, that really serves a very important springboard to bring a heightened awareness and a desire to come closer. Ironically, you can think of it in the following manner. Had he not once been estranged from God, he would never come to this kind of yearning. Right? It's when a person's been, far away, there's something builds up inside of him, a distancing, a yearning to come closer. So in a certain sense, the transgression brings him to that point. The darkest moments of his life, what were once his greatest liabilities, through teshuvah can become his greatest assets. The source of an intense motivation for this, you could say, a refound closeness to Hashem. Now, such a condition where the past becomes virtues cannot be premeditated, so to speak. God's rule book could never prescribe failure to serve God properly as a way to later become closer. God wasn't giving us all kinds of, negative things to be able to bring us closer. The opportunity to transform the past comes from the person themselves. He must ask for it, and only then he's granted. And just as it applies in the biblical example, the people themselves asked God, why should we be left out? And were given a second chance. So too in recovery. Recovery. People in recovery eventually find a new relationship with God. There's an appreciation for Hashem's wisdom, for His love, His guidance, that we are quite sure that never would have been possible had we not been forced to turn our lives over to Him, which is really what goes on in recovery, when a person pauses and says, I'm going to go back to my source, to my spirituality. As only known treatment for a disease such as this. You could say in the following: we did not become alcoholics in order that we could later discover God in recovery. Nor it is something that we never have planned. It isn't even something God would have told us to do. Become an alcoholic and then become, and come back and recover. And that's something very, very important to recognize, that people who have fallen into this trap don't do it because they want to do it. God didn't somehow choose certain people, say, you're going to become an alcoholic, work on yourself, and then return. That doesn't work that way. Some might think it odd that when we hear an alcoholic in recovery say something like this, and I've heard it many times: being an alcoholic is the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Perhaps they think that recovery is meant only to make us more like normal people, to catch us up. But we do not have the dubious luxury enjoyed. That's what a person in recovery really says. We don't have the same abilities that, so to speak, normal people like ourselves who decide how and when we let God into our lives. We have to be appreciative. Such is our fortune. That we must strive. In the case of an alcoholic, someone who's recovering, must strive to join that happy lot. So have that in mind, dear friends. The recovering alcoholic doesn't have the choices that we had, that we made to be where we are today. They didn't have that. And they're trying to catch up. But when they catch up in a very strong and a positive manner. The alcoholic never plans it. God would never have advised it, oh, become an alcoholic and start recovery. But this is how things worked out. And this is what has made us closer to Him today. That's what goes on in a recovering alcoholic. The person in recovery knows very well the importance of second chances. No matter where they've been, or how low they may have fallen, they recognize the 12 steps as explained through Torah, and Dr. Twersky, who elaborates them in a very, very special way, that with Hashem's help, every single one is able to look at themselves, to make amends, and to begin again. Sometimes again and again. And this is where this holiday, this perhaps little known Jewish holiday that falls on this year, May 14th, 2014, celebrates, Pesach Sheni celebrates the concept of second chances. Pesach Sheni, second Passover, is not about cleaning and cooking and sitting around through Seder's all over. We did that on the first Passover. Nor is it a week-long festival of eating matzah as in the first Passover. The second Passover is just one day. It's one day. What is it all about in a deeper sense? It's a one-day celebration of the ability that Hashem has given all of us to call out to Him. It is, so to speak, God's message to all of us. It's never too late. Sometimes our second chances come as small incidents during otherwise uneventful days. Give you an example. We speak hurtful words to someone. We catch ourselves and we apologize. Or we miss an important deadline and are subsequently granted an extension to be able to go on. We're given a second chance. I must share with you something personal. My father, of blessed memory, was a Holocaust survivor. I'm a child of a Holocaust survivor. My father, of blessed memory, his entire life was replete with second chances. He survived numerous dramatic encounters with death in the Holocaust. He passed away on Pesach Sheni, Friday Pesach Sheni, the second Passover, 15 years ago. Today, I marvel. My entire teaching of my father's life, that he was an individual who survived on second chances. He appreciated the second chance God gave him, so to speak, having survived and came out of Auschwitz and moved to Belgium, then moved to Paris, and then moved to London, and then moved to the United States of America. All predicated in appreciation of the second chance God gave him to survive. At the time Pesach Sheni was instituted way back, people complained, why should we be left out? They were either impure, as the history is, they were carrying the bones of Joseph at that time. People who were far away couldn't make it to Jerusalem, biblical times. So that's how it was historically. So the people back in history who made that plea for a second chance to bring the Passover offering, our ancestors really have given expression to our own inner truths. Their question is our question. Because all of us have inherited within ourselves, we've adopted behavior and traits that stand us well from our ancestors. But sometimes we adopt situations that don't serve us so well. And we may not be where we should be. So should we miss out on the joys of life? Each of us, today, as we discuss and learn and appreciate what this Pesach Sheni reminds us of, that every one of us wants fullness, wants richness and serenity in our lives. All of us want true relationships and true closeness in our relationships, in every area of our life. And therefore, on a day like Pesach Sheni, we are to appreciate this gift of recovery that all of us, whether in the stricter sense of recovering alcoholic or some other kind of abuse and substance abuse, or all of us, we all have the gift of recovery. And it all stems from our connection with Hashem. Because biblically, it was the bringing of the offering. This day was predicated on bringing an offering. The Pesach, the Passover lamb. Pesach, the Korban Pesach is about coming closer to God. In our days too, we bring our offerings, so to speak, as a way of coming closer to God. What does it mean? We recognize sometimes things which are, not exactly right, and we elevate them. We offer our addictions, our passions, our habits, and we ask Hashem, please, we beg of you, Hashem, remove the obstacles to our spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being, reflecting of what our ancestors of old presented to God and were given a second chance. So even though Pesach Sheni occurs once a year, it's only 1 month after Passover on the 14th day of Iyar, which this year is May the 14th. But we carry this as a wonderful message and lesson all of our lives. We seek to recover ourselves, our personal growth on a daily basis. We take personal inventory and we promptly admit when we've made a mistake. And because the Torah is telling us we're allowed to make mistakes, and we do get second chances. And therefore, this is a special day to remind ourselves to appreciate the opportunities God gives us in so many different ways. Again, when we celebrate Pesach Sheni, how do we do it? We eat matzah again, but this time we don't have to rid our entire homes of bread. Before Passover, the real Passover, we get rid of all the chametz. On a deeper sense, the chametz represents getting rid of all of our arrogant natures. In this case, Passover, the second Pesach, is we bring ourselves to God as we are, defects and all. We have in our home bread and crackers. At the same time, we eat matzah. It doesn't matter how old we are, how lost we may have been, or where we're holding in our lives today. God tells us on this special day, we have a second chance. And Hashem obliges, so to speak, and has given us this incredible gift, incredible gift of appreciating that we can always make up and we can move forward in so many ways. So, dear friends, I want to thank you so much for joining us and appreciating all the gifts that we have, and to look around and recognize how many opportunities God gives us time and time again to be able to make up. This is your host, Rabbi Pearl, wishing you all the best. And until next time, seid gesund and all the best.